This is an Oklahoma Freedman history. What names do you know in Oklahoma Freedman history? Are you still just studying your own family history but have no idea who others were, not only in the nation where your Freedman ancestors may have resided, but also throughout the territory? Beyond the usual names that you hear in Oklahoma Black history, there are usually three, sometimes four, whose names always appear. But these individuals were not freedmen from the Five Tribes. There's, of course, Bass Reeves, U.S. Deputy Marshal, amazing history. Edwin McCabe, an auditor from Kansas, who brought many people into Indian territory. And we know from the civil rights era the actions and the accomplishments of Clara Luper, a very important woman in the civil rights era. But there are more names to know from the history of freedmen from Indian Territory. Here are 10 names that you should know. There is Sugar T. George. This man was a tribal council leader in the Muskogee Creek Nation, and he served in both ruling houses of the nation, in the House of Warriors and the House of Kings. He was also town king of North Forktown. He was a Civil War veteran serving in the Indian Home Guards and the United States Colored Troops. And he was also, many people are unaware, superintendent at one time of Tallahassee Manual Labor School. There is Silas Jefferson, a Civil War soldier also from the Indian Home Guards. He was a tribal council leader from Tuskegee Town in the Creek Nation. He served in the ruling house in the House of Kings. He was also a cultural preservationist because he worked with anthropologists from the Smithsonian Institution, Swanton and Speck. Incredible history. Silas Jefferson was also, as was mentioned, a soldier in the Indian Home Guards, and he was also part of an official delegation of Creeks to Washington, D.C. There's Simon Clark. He was the very first person from the Choctaw Nation to be enrolled as a freedman. And as you can see, his census card is number 1. He served at one time during his life as an interpreter during the Dawes Commission era. He was also a Civil War soldier. You notice that he served in Company G of the Kansas Colored Infantry and of the 2nd Kansas, and he was later in the same company of the 83rd United States Colored Infantry. He applied for and received a pension, and after he passed away, his widow also applied for and received a Civil War widow's pension. There is Betty Ligon. She's the daughter of Robert H. Love, who's the signer, one of the many signers of the Treaty of 1866. She was head litigant in Equity Case 7071, a class action suit of over 1,600 freedmen seeking transfer to the blood rolls. She was a community advocate and a leader. There's Hagar Myers. Fewer people have heard of Hagar Myers. A simple woman lived a quiet life. But this woman was able to assist in bringing a peaceful end to the Green Peach War. Many don't know exactly what she did. There's a story that will be told at another time, more detail about her. She is now buried where she lived, in Fort Gibson. There's Bynum Colbert. What a man with a rich history. He was a Choctaw freedman. He was also a Civil War soldier. Then he became a Buffalo soldier and later a United States Deputy Marshal. He sort of had the trifecta of major accomplishments of the 19th century. Incredible man from the Choctaw Nation. There's Caesar Bruner. This man was born free in Florida, ended up being brought to Indian Territory when Seminoles were removed after the Second Seminole War. He became a leader in the Black Seminole community. He is also a spokesperson for many freedmen in the community. And he was also leader of a tribal band that still bears his name today, the Caesar Bruner Band. There's James Cootie Johnson. Now, this man was a Creek freedman, but most of his accomplishments he was really able to make in the Seminole Nation. This man was an attorney, a very wealthy businessman, and a rancher. He was a leading attorney over the years for many Creek freedmen and, well, Seminole freedmen as well, in terms of issues pertaining to their land or acquisition of their land allotments. And he was also host of something known as the Negro State Fair. This was an event that occurred for several days in October, and it occurred on his ranch. In fact, if you really read more detail about the big Oklahoma Negro State Fair, you'll find that the governor allowed of course, this is the era of segregation, the colored schools to be closed so that colored children could attend the state fair on the ranch of James Cootie Johnson. There's a man well into the 20th century, Eddie Warrior. He's a Creek freedman himself and a leading 20th century educator in Muskogee County. Facilities are actually named after him due to his role over the years in the community. There's Annie Keel, who was basically an active churchwoman. For those of you who study and have an interest in the AME Church, Annie Keel was the woman who was responsible for assisting in bringing the AME Church to several parts of the Choctaw Nation, including the settlement in Boggy Depot, the area now known as Whitehall. She helped organize a meeting as early as 1870. This is 6 years after citizenship, well, not citizenship, but abolishment of slavery had occurred. And he ended up speaking to over 300 freedmen. And she listened and decided, she didn't totally agree with what the Chickasaw chief was actually saying to freedmen, because he was encouraging them, well, why don't you all just get on up and go to a land that welcomes you? Just go on to Liberia. But she realized, no, we have institutions here in America. This is our home. And she ended up reaching out to leaders, elders in the AME church, because she knew that there was some structure there. And she was able to put some energy into bringing representatives from the AME church and was able to actually work to establish more than one AME church in Indian Territory. Lucinda Davis, fascinating Creek freedwoman. She was bilingual in both Muskogee and English languages. She was an eyewitness when she was a child to the Battle of Honey Springs. She talked about it and many details of her life. She really was able to highlight in her interviews during the era of the WPA slave narrative. She lived as long as the 1930s and told her story. She was immersed in the Creek culture. She was bilingual. And in fact, when you read her narrative, she even explains what certain words mean as she's speaking both Muskogee and English. These 10 people are just really scratching the surface. They are significant people in Oklahoma history, and these are names that emerged from 20,000 people classified as freedmen. Study their history, learn their story, and put their names back on the historical landscape from which they come. This has been an Oklahoma Freedmen History Moment.